The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Windsor Castle, as Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood quietly at the window of their private quarters. Her fingers traced the cool glass while she watched the gardeners tending to the rose bushes below. These were the same roses that had bloomed every spring for decades. Witnessing countless royal moments of joy and sorrow, William entered the room carrying 2 cups of tea, his footsteps soft on the Persian carpet. He noticed the way Catherine's shoulders seemed smaller today, how she held herself as if carrying an invisible weight. They had been married for over a decade, and he could read her moods like pages in a familiar book. "The children are asking questions again," Catherine said without turning around. Her voice was steady, but William caught the slight tremor that she tried to hide. "George wanted to know why we've been having so many serious conversations behind closed doors." William set the teacups on the antique mahogany table and moved to stand beside his wife. Through the window they could see the flag flying at full mast, a sight that had become increasingly rare in recent months. The palace had been unusually quiet, with staff speaking in hushed tones and visitors coming and going with solemn expressions. "What did you tell him?" William asked, placing a gentle hand on Catherine's shoulder. She finally turned to face him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of strength and vulnerability that had endeared her to millions around the world. "I told him that sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions for the good of everyone they love." The weight of their situation hung between them like a heavy curtain. For weeks they had been meeting with palace officials, constitutional experts, and family members. The conversations always ended the same way, with sympathetic looks and careful words that danced around the inevitable conclusion they all knew was coming. Catherine picked up her tea and walked to the seating area where family photos adorned every surface. Pictures of their wedding day, the children's christenings, official state visits, and quiet family moments captured by palace photographers. Each image told a story of duty, love, and service to the crown and country. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding day?" Catherine asked, settling into the cream-colored armchair that had become her favorite spot for morning reflection. William smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in days. "I said many things that day. My nerves were getting the better of me. You said that no matter what challenges we would face as a couple, we would face them together, that our love would be stronger than any protocol or tradition." Catherine's voice grew softer. "You promised that you would never let the crown come between us and our family's happiness." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The very institution that had brought them together, that had given their love story global significance, was now threatening to tear apart everything they held dear. Recent events had created an impossible situation where duty to country and duty to family seemed to pull in opposite directions. William sat across from his wife, his own tea growing cold as he studied her face. She had aged gracefully over their years together, but the stress of recent months had added lines around her eyes that makeup could no longer fully conceal. Yet she remained as beautiful to him as the day they met at university, when she was just Kate Middleton and he was simply William Wales. "The Prime Minister called again this morning," William said quietly. "Parliament is growing more insistent about a formal response to the situation." Catherine nodded, having expected this development. The political implications of their personal crisis had grown beyond what anyone could have anticipated. What had started as a private family matter had evolved into a constitutional question that threatened the stability of the monarchy itself. "And what did you tell him?" she asked, though she already knew the answer from the expression on her husband's face. "I told him we needed more time. But Catherine, we both know that time is something we don't have much of anymore." Outside, the sound of helicopters could be heard in the distance. The media attention had intensified over the past week, with reporters and photographers maintaining a constant vigil outside the palace gates. Every movement, every official car that entered or left the grounds, was scrutinized and analyzed by experts who claimed to understand the inner workings of the royal family. Catherine stood and moved to another window, one that offered a view of the long driveway leading to the main gates. She could see the crowd of journalists and camera crews, their equipment reflecting the morning sunlight like a modern army laying siege to the ancient castle. "They're all waiting for us to make an announcement," she observed. "The whole world is watching, waiting to see what we'll decide." William joined her at the window, and together they stood in silence, watching the scene below. It struck him how their private pain had become public entertainment, how their most personal decisions were being debated in television studios and newspaper columns around the globe. "Whatever we decide," William said, taking Catherine's hand in his, "we decide together, just as we promised all those years ago." Catherine squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his touch. She knew that the next few days would change their lives forever, that the fairy tale that millions had followed and celebrated was approaching a crossroads that no amount of royal protocol could navigate for them. The morning sun continued to climb higher, casting new shadows across the room as the couple stood together, facing an uncertain future with the same unity that had carried them through over a decade of marriage, parenthood, and public service. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to Windsor Castle. King Charles arrived without the usual fanfare, his black sedan pulling quietly through the private entrance away from the watching cameras. Catherine observed his arrival from the window, noting how her father-in-law seemed to carry the weight of the crown more heavily these days. When Charles entered their sitting room, Catherine was struck by how much older he appeared than just a few months ago. The stress of recent events had taken its toll on the entire family, but nowhere was it more visible than in the king's tired eyes and the way he moved with careful deliberation. "Father," William greeted him with a warm embrace. Despite everything happening around them, the bond between father and son remained strong. Charles accepted a cup of tea and settled into the chair that had once belonged to his late mother. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of them, the continuity of the monarchy sitting in that very spot, while discussing its potential disruption. "I've been thinking about your grandmother," Charles said to William, his voice carrying the weight of history. "She faced her own impossible choices during the war years. Different circumstances, certainly, but the same fundamental question of duty versus personal happiness." Catherine listened carefully, knowing that Charles rarely spoke about his mother in such personal terms. The late queen had been a figure of unwavering duty, someone who had famously declared that her whole life would be devoted to service. But Catherine also knew that behind the public image had been a woman who had made profound personal sacrifices. "The difference," Charles continued, "is that she lived in a time when the choice seemed clearer. Duty was duty and personal desires were secondary. Today's world is more complicated." William exchanged a glance with Catherine. They both understood what Charles was really saying. That the rigid rules that had governed previous generations might not be suitable for the challenges they faced. Today, the children don't understand why everything has changed so suddenly, Catherine said. "Yesterday, Charlotte asked me if we were still going to live in the same house. I didn't know how to answer her." Charles's expression softened. As a grandfather, he had watched his grandchildren grow up in the unique bubble of royal life, shielded from most of the pressures that came with their birthright. The thought of that innocence being shattered clearly pained him. "What does your heart tell you to do?" Charles asked his daughter-in-law directly. It was a question that Catherine had been avoiding even in her own thoughts. Her heart told her many things: to protect her children, to preserve her marriage, to honor the commitments she had made when she joined the royal family. But it also told her that some prices were too high to pay, even for duty. "My heart tells me that our children's well-being comes first," Catherine answered honestly, "but my conscience reminds me of the promises I made to the people who have supported us, who have invested their hopes in what we represent." William reached for her hand again, a gesture that had become their silent language of support over the years. "The people who truly support us want us to be happy," he said. "Real love doesn't demand suffering as proof of devotion." Charles nodded slowly, understanding passing between the generations. "I've made mistakes in my own life by putting duty before everything else. I've also made mistakes by putting personal happiness first. There's no perfect answer, only the answer that allows you to live with yourselves." The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. One of the private secretaries entered with a folder of documents that required attention. Even in crisis, the machinery of the monarchy continued to function, demanding signatures, approvals, and decisions on matters both trivial and significant. Catherine watched William review the papers, his pen moving automatically across familiar forms. This had been their life for over a decade, a constant stream of obligations, ceremonies, and responsibilities that shaped every day, from morning until night. She wondered what it would feel like to wake up one morning without that weight, without the knowledge that every word and action would be scrutinized by millions. "There's something else we need to discuss," Charles said after the secretary left. "The Archbishop has requested a private meeting with both of you. There are questions about the religious implications of whatever decision you make." Catherine felt a chill run through her. The Church of England's role in the monarchy was not merely ceremonial. It was fundamental to the entire structure of the crown. Any decision they made would need to be reconciled with centuries of religious tradition and doctrine. "When?" William asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't looking forward to the conversation. "Tomorrow morning. He's coming here rather than asking you to go to Canterbury. He understands the sensitivity of the situation." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of phone calls, meetings, and careful conversations with staff members who had served the family for years. Catherine found herself paying attention to details she had previously taken for granted. The way the footman stood at attention when she passed, the deference in everyone's voice, the careful protocol that governed every interaction. That evening, after Charles had departed and the children were settled in their rooms, Catherine and William took a walk through the private gardens. The autumn air was crisp, and the setting sun painted the ancient stone walls in shades of gold and amber. "Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if we had never met?" Catherine asked as they paused beside the fountain that had been a wedding gift from a foreign dignitary. William considered the question seriously. "Different, certainly. Probably easier in some ways. But I can't imagine being truly happy without you and the children." They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the gentle splash of water and the distant sound of evening traffic beyond the castle walls. It was easy to forget, in moments like these, that they were at the center of a constitutional crisis that was being debated in Parliament and analyzed in newspapers around the world. "Whatever tomorrow brings," Catherine said softly. "I want you to know that I've never regretted saying yes when you proposed, even knowing everything that would come after." William turned to face her, his expression tender in the fading light. "Even now? Even with everything we're facing?" Catherine smiled, the first genuine smile that had crossed her face in days. "Especially now, because now I know that you meant it when you said we would face everything together." As darkness fell over Windsor Castle, the couple made their way back inside hand in hand, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring to their extraordinary love story. The Archbishop of Canterbury arrived at Windsor Castle just as the morning mist was lifting from the Thames. Catherine watched from the window as the distinguished man in dark robes stepped from his car, his expression grave but kind. She had met him many times over the years at state functions and religious ceremonies. But this meeting felt entirely different. William paced nervously around their sitting room, straightening papers that didn't need straightening and adjusting picture frames that were already perfectly aligned. Catherine recognized this behavior from their early dating days, when he would become restless before important conversations with his family. "Your Royal Highnesses," the Archbishop greeted them warmly as he entered. Though the formal address seemed to carry additional weight this morning, Catherine offered him tea, grateful for the familiar ritual that provided structure to an otherwise uncomfortable situation. "Thank you for coming to us," William said, settling into his chair. "We know this isn't easy for anyone involved." The Archbishop nodded thoughtfully. "The Church has weathered many storms over the centuries. Each generation faces challenges that test our understanding of faith, duty, and compassion. Your situation is unique, but the underlying questions are as old as humanity itself." Catherine appreciated his gentle approach. She had worried that this meeting would be filled with lectures about duty and tradition, demands that they sacrifice their personal happiness for institutional stability. Instead, the Archbishop seemed genuinely interested in understanding their perspective. "We've been married in the eyes of God and the Church," Catherine said carefully. "Our vows were sacred to us then, and they remain sacred now. But we're struggling to reconcile our responsibilities to our family with our responsibilities to the Crown." The Archbishop leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together. "Tell me about your children. How are they processing all of this?" It was a question that went straight to Catherine's heart. "They know something is wrong, but they don't understand what. George has been having nightmares. Charlotte won't let go of my hand when we're in public. Louis keeps asking if we're moving house again." William's jaw tightened. "They didn't choose this life, we did. They're paying the price for decisions they had no part in making. And yet," the Archbishop said gently, they are also blessed with opportunities and privileges that come with their position. The question becomes whether those blessings outweigh the burdens. Catherine stood and moved to the mantelpiece where family photos showed happier times. Beach holidays, Christmas mornings, the children's first days at school. In every image they looked like any other family, united by love and joy. "My mother calls me every day," Catherine said, her voice catching slightly. "She asks how we're holding up, if there's anything she can do to help." "But what can anyone do? How do you help your daughter choose between her marriage and her duty to an entire nation?" The Archbishop was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "In my experience, the most difficult decisions are rarely between good and evil. They're usually between two different kinds of good. Your love for each other and your children is good. Your service to the country and the church is also good. The tragedy is that these goods seem to be in conflict." William looked up sharply. "Seem to be in conflict? Do you think there's a way forward that honors both?" "I think," the Archbishop said slowly, "that God's love is larger than our human institutions. The Church has evolved over centuries, adapting to new circumstances while maintaining its core mission. Perhaps this is one of those moments when adaptation is required." Catherine felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. "What would that look like?" "I don't know yet. But I do know that forcing you to choose between your family's well-being and your service to others serves no one well. A monarch who rules with a broken heart cannot truly serve their people. A church that demands the destruction of loving families contradicts its own teachings about the sanctity of marriage and parenthood." The conversation continued for another hour, ranging from theological discussions to practical considerations about the future of the monarchy. The Archbishop asked probing questions about their faith, their understanding of service, and their vision for the royal family in the modern world. When he finally prepared to leave, the Archbishop paused at the door. "I want you both to know that whatever decision you make, you will not be making it alone. The Church at its best is about supporting families and communities through their most difficult times. That includes royal families." After he left, Catherine and William sat in stunned silence. Neither had expected such understanding and compassion from an institution they had viewed as rigid and unforgiving. "Do you think he meant what he said about adaptation?" Catherine asked. "I think he's telling us that change is possible, but it won't be easy or quick," William replied. "The question is whether we have the strength to fight for it." That afternoon brought another difficult conversation, this time with the children's headmaster. The media attention had begun to affect their school life, with photographers attempting to get pictures during pickup and drop-off times. Other parents were asking questions, and the children were becoming aware that their family was the subject of intense public interest. "We may need to consider alternative arrangements for their education," the headmaster said diplomatically. "Private tutoring perhaps until the situation stabilizes." Catherine's heart sank. The children's school had been their one refuge from royal protocol, the place where they could be relatively normal children among their peers. Losing that would be another sacrifice demanded by their circumstances. "How long might that be necessary?" William asked. "That depends entirely on what decision you make, and how the public responds to it." After the headmaster left, Catherine found herself in the children's playroom, surrounded by toys and artwork that spoke of happy, carefree childhood moments. She picked up a drawing that Charlotte had made the week before, a picture of their family standing in front of a house with a large garden and a dog. "Mummy, are you sad?" Louis appeared in the doorway, his small face serious beyond his years. Catherine knelt down and pulled her youngest child into her arms. "Sometimes grown-ups feel sad when they have to make important decisions. But do you know what makes me feel better?" "What?" "Hugs from my children." Louis wrapped his arms around her neck and squeezed tight. "Will everything be okay, Mummy?" Catherine closed her eyes and held her son close, breathing in the sweet scent of his hair. "Yes, my darling. Everything will be okay. It might be different than what we expected, but it will be okay." As evening approached, Catherine and William made a decision. Tomorrow they would begin the process of announcing their choice to the world. Tonight, they would have one last family dinner in the formal dining room, one last evening of being the people they had been before everything changed. The weight of their decision settled over them like a heavy blanket. But beneath it, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months: peace. They had chosen their path, and whatever came next, they would walk it together. The family dinner that evening was both ordinary and extraordinary. Catherine had requested that the staff prepare the children's favorite meal, shepherd's pie with fresh vegetables from the castle gardens. She wanted this last formal dinner to feel like home, not like a state occasion. George, Charlotte, and Louis chattered about their day at school, blissfully unaware that their parents had spent the afternoon making decisions that would reshape their entire world. Catherine watched her children's animated faces as they told stories about their friends, their teachers, and the upcoming school play. "Mummy, will you help me practice my lines for the Nativity?" Charlotte asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "I'm playing an angel and I have to remember all the words." Catherine's throat tightened. The Nativity play was still 6 weeks away, and she wasn't certain where they would be by then, or whether Charlotte would still be attending the same school. "Of course, darling. We'll practice every day until you know them perfectly." William caught Catherine's eye across the table, understanding the weight behind her promise. They had agreed that whatever changes came, they would do everything possible to maintain normalcy for the children during the transition. After dinner, they gathered in the family sitting room for their evening routine. Louis curled up on Catherine's lap, while she read him a story about a brave little mouse who went on adventures far from home. The parallels weren't lost on her. Sometimes the bravest thing was leaving the safety of what you knew to find where you truly belonged. "Will you read another one?" Louis asked as she closed the book. "One more," Catherine agreed, selecting a story about a family of bears who faced challenges together. As she read about their adventures and how they supported each other through difficulties, she felt William's hand rest gently on her shoulder. When the children were finally tucked into their beds, Catherine and William retreated to their private study. The room was lined with books on history, politics, and constitutional law, subjects that had taken on new relevance in recent months. William poured 2 glasses of wine while Catherine stared into the fireplace, watching the flames dance against the ancient stones. "I keep thinking about what the Archbishop said," Catherine said softly, "about God's love being larger than our human institutions." William handed her a glass and settled beside her on the sofa. "Do you think we're being selfish? Putting our happiness above our duty?" Catherine considered the question carefully. "I think we're being human. I think we're choosing to believe that our love for each other and our children matters as much as our love for our country." They sat in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the magnitude of what lay ahead. Tomorrow they would begin the process of sharing their decision with the palace officials, the government, and eventually the world. There would be meetings with constitutional experts, discussions with parliamentary leaders, and careful negotiations about the terms of their transition. "Are you frightened?" Catherine asked. "Terrified," William admitted, "but also relieved. For the first time in months, I feel like we're moving towards something instead of just trying to avoid disaster." Catherine leaned against her husband's shoulder, drawing comfort from his strength. "What do you think your mother would have said about all this?" William was quiet for a long moment. His mother's memory remained a powerful presence in his life, especially during difficult decisions. "I think she would have understood." She knew what it was like to feel trapped by duty, to struggle with the balance between public service and personal happiness. She would have supported us. I think she would have told us to follow our hearts even if it meant walking a difficult path. The next morning brought a steady stream of visitors to Windsor Castle. The Prime Minister arrived first, his expression grim as he was escorted to the private meeting room. Catherine watched from the window as his black car pulled through the gates, followed by several other official vehicles. The meeting with government officials lasted for hours. Catherine and William sat at one end of a long mahogany table, while constitutional experts, legal advisors, and political representatives occupied the other chairs. The discussion was formal and careful, with each word chosen for its precision and diplomatic weight. "The implications are significant," the Prime Minister said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed a stack of documents. "We're looking at constitutional questions that haven't been tested in modern times." Catherine listened as the experts debated precedents, protocols, and procedures. The conversation felt surreal, as if they were discussing characters in a history book rather than her own life. William maintained his composure throughout, asking thoughtful questions and providing clear answers about their intentions. "What about the Commonwealth?" asked one of the advisors. The other realms will need to be consulted and informed. We understand, William replied. We're prepared to participate in whatever discussions are necessary to ensure a smooth transition. When the government officials finally departed, Catherine felt drained. The formal nature of the meeting had made their personal decision feel like a matter of state, which in many ways it was. The line between their private lives and public duty had been blurred for so long that separating them would require careful legal and constitutional work. That afternoon, they met with senior palace staff who had served the royal family for decades. These conversations were more personal, as Catherine and William thanked people who had become like family over the years. You've given us more than we ever could have asked for, Catherine told her private secretary, a woman who had helped her navigate the complexities of royal life since her engagement. Your loyalty and friendship have meant everything. The emotional weight of these conversations was harder to bear than the formal meetings. These were people who had shared their joys and sorrows, who had worked behind the scenes to make their public duties successful, who had protected their privacy and supported their family. That evening, as Catherine helped Charlotte practice her lines for the nativity play, she was struck by the irony that her daughter would be playing an angel announcing good news. In a few days, Catherine and William would be making their own announcement, though whether it would be received as good news remained to be seen. Mummy, why do angels have to be brave? Charlotte asked, looking up from her script. Catherine smiled at her daughter's perceptive question. Because sometimes bringing important news requires courage even when you're not sure how people will react. Were you brave when you married Daddy? The innocent question caught Catherine off guard. I tried to be. Sometimes being brave means making choices that feel scary but right in your heart. Charlotte nodded solemnly, as if filing away this wisdom for future use. I think you're very brave, Mummy. Later that night, as Catherine and William prepared for bed, they both felt the weight of the approaching public announcement. Tomorrow would bring another round of meetings, more documents to sign, and additional preparations for the moment when their private decision would become public knowledge. No matter what happens, William said, taking Catherine's hand as they turned off the lights, we'll face it together. Catherine squeezed his hand in response, knowing that their quiet farewell to this chapter of their lives was almost complete, and their new journey was about to begin. The morning of the announcement dawned gray and overcast, as if the weather itself understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. Catherine stood in front of her wardrobe, carefully selecting what she would wear for what might be her last official appearance as a working member of the royal family. She chose a navy blue dress with pearl earrings that had belonged to William's grandmother. The symbolism felt important, honoring the past while stepping into an uncertain future. William appeared behind her in the mirror, adjusting his tie with hands that trembled slightly. Second thoughts? Catherine asked gently, recognizing the signs of his nervousness. About our decision? No, about having to explain it to the world? Absolutely. They had spent the previous evening rehearsing their statement with communication experts, practicing the words that would reshape public understanding of their role in the monarchy. Every phrase had been carefully crafted to convey respect for the institution, while explaining their personal choice. The children had been told that Mummy and Daddy would be on television today, making an important announcement about their family. George, with his growing understanding of royal protocol, had asked if they were getting new titles. Catherine had smiled sadly and told him that sometimes changes meant letting go of old titles, rather than gaining new ones. At precisely 11 o'clock, Catherine and William walked together into the green drawing room at Windsor Castle, where television cameras and journalists waited. The formal setting felt appropriate for such a momentous announcement, surrounded by centuries of royal history and portraits of monarchs who had faced their own impossible choices. William stepped up to the podium first, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to say. Catherine and I have always believed that our greatest responsibility is not just to the crown, but to our family, and to living with integrity and authenticity. Catherine watched the faces of the journalists as William continued, explaining their decision to step back from their roles as working royals, while maintaining their respect and love for the institution of the monarchy. Some looked shocked, others seemed to have anticipated this moment, but all understood they were witnessing history. When it was Catherine's turn to speak, she felt a strange calm settle over her. The royal family has been blessed with incredible support from the British people and the Commonwealth. That support has sustained us through many challenges, and we hope it will continue as we transition to a new way of serving. She spoke about their gratitude for the opportunities they had been given, their commitment to their charitable work, and their determination to raise their children with the values of service and compassion that had guided their royal duties. Her voice caught only once when she mentioned how difficult it had been to reach this decision. We want our children to grow up understanding both the privilege and responsibility of their heritage, while also having the freedom to choose their own paths when the time comes. The questions from the press were respectful, but probing. How would this affect the line of succession? What would their new titles be? Where would they live? William and Catherine answered what they could while acknowledging that many details were still being worked out. One journalist asked the question that everyone was thinking. Your Royal Highnesses, do you believe the monarchy can survive this departure? William exchanged a glance with Catherine before answering. The monarchy has survived and thrived for over 1,000 years by adapting to changing times while maintaining its core mission of service. We believe that our decision, rather than weakening the institution, demonstrates its capacity for compassion and understanding of human nature. When the formal press conference ended, Catherine and William made their way to a private room where King Charles was waiting with other family members. The conversations were emotional but supportive, with everyone acknowledging that this decision, while difficult, had been made with careful consideration and love. I'm proud of both of you, Charles said, embracing his son and daughter-in-law. It takes courage to choose the path that's right for your family, even when it's not the easiest path. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls, meetings, and private conversations with staff members. The children were picked up early from school to avoid the media circus that had erupted outside the gates. Catherine was grateful for the palace's ability to shield them from the immediate aftermath of the announcement. That evening, the family gathered for what they knew would be their last dinner in the formal dining room as working royals. The children seemed to sense the significance of the moment, eating quietly and watching their parents' faces for clues about what would happen next. Are we still going to live here? Louis asked as dessert was served. Not forever, Catherine answered gently, but we'll make sure you always feel at home wherever we are. Will we still be a family? Charlotte asked, her young mind trying to process the changes. William leaned forward, his voice firm and reassuring. We will always be a family. That's the one thing that will never change, no matter what else happens. After the children were in bed, Catherine and William took one final walk through the castle grounds. The media had been kept at a distance, but they could see the glow of television lights and satellite trucks beyond the gates. Tomorrow, newspapers around the world would carry the story of their decision, and the global conversation about the future of the monarchy would begin in earnest. Do you think we've done the right thing? Catherine asked as they paused beside the rose garden where they had shared so many quiet moments over the years. William pulled her close, both of them looking up at the ancient stones of Windsor Castle, silhouetted against the night sky. I think we've done the honest thing, and sometimes that's the same as the right thing. Inside the castle, staff members were already beginning the process of packing personal belongings and preparing for the transition. The machinery of royal protocol was adapting to this unprecedented situation, with legal experts working through the night to finalize the details of their new status. Catherine felt a mixture of sadness and relief. As she looked at the home that had sheltered their family through so many milestones, they would miss the security and tradition of royal life. But they were also excited about the possibility of greater privacy and the chance to make choices based on their own values rather than centuries-old expectations. Whatever comes next, Catherine said softly. I'm grateful we found the courage to choose love over duty. William kissed her forehead gently. We chose both. We just redefined what duty means for our family. As they made their way back inside, Catherine realized that their quiet farewell to royal life was nearly complete. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight belonged to them and the children who had made this difficult decision worthwhile. The story that had captivated millions was entering a new chapter, one written not by protocol or tradition but by love, courage, and the belief that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose your own happiness. 3 weeks after the announcement, Catherine stood in the doorway of what had been her office at Kensington Palace, watching as the last of her personal items were carefully packed into boxes. The walls looked strange without the photographs and artwork that had made the space feel welcoming to the countless visitors who had come to discuss charitable projects over the years. Her private secretary approached with a final folder of correspondence. "These are letters from some of the charities you've supported," she explained. "They wanted you to know that your work with them has made a lasting difference." Catherine opened the folder and read through messages from organizations focused on early childhood development, mental health, and the arts. Each letter expressed gratitude for her patronage and understanding of her decision to step back from official duties. Many included invitations to continue their relationships in a private capacity. "They still want to work with you," her secretary observed. "Your impact didn't depend on your title." It was a revelation that had surprised Catherine over the past few weeks. She had worried that leaving her royal role would mean abandoning the causes she cared about most. Instead, she was discovering that her passion for helping others could continue in new ways, perhaps with even more authenticity than before. William appeared in the doorway, his own packing nearly complete. "The children are asking if they can keep their rooms exactly the same in the new house." Catherine smiled, closing the folder of letters. "What did you tell them?" "That we'll do our best to make the new place feel like home. But that home is really wherever our family is together." They had found a house in the countryside, far enough from London to provide privacy, but close enough for William to continue his work with various causes during the transition period. It wasn't a palace or a castle, but it had a large garden where the children could play freely, and neighbors who had promised to respect their desire for a quieter life. The media reaction to their announcement had been mixed but largely sympathetic. While some commentators had criticized their decision as selfish, many more had praised their courage and honesty. Public opinion polls showed that a majority of people understood their choice and wished them well for the future. King Charles had handled the constitutional implications with remarkable grace, working with Parliament and the Commonwealth realms to ensure a smooth transition. The line of succession remained unchanged, but new protocols were being developed to accommodate William and Catherine's unique status as former working royals. Mrs. Henderson from the children's new school called, William said as they made their way through the corridors. "She wanted to reassure us that they have experience with high-profile families and understand the importance of maintaining normalcy." Catherine felt relief wash over her. The children's education had been one of her biggest concerns during the transition. George, Charlotte, and Louis needed stability and the chance to develop friendships without the constant pressure of media attention. "How are they adjusting to the idea of starting over?" Catherine asked. "Better than I expected. Charlotte drew a picture yesterday of our new house with a big dog in the garden. Apparently we're getting a golden retriever." Catherine laughed, the first truly carefree sound she had made in weeks. "Are we?" "According to Charlotte, yes. And according to Louis, it's going to be named Sir Woofington." They paused at the entrance to the children's wing, where sounds of laughter and playful arguing could be heard from the playroom. Despite all the changes happening around them, George, Charlotte, and Louis seemed remarkably resilient, focusing more on the adventure of moving house than on the loss of their royal status. "Your Highnesses," a familiar voice called from behind them. Catherine turned to see one of the senior footmen approaching, a man who had served the royal family for over 30 years. "Robert," Catherine said warmly, "I was hoping to see you before we left." The elderly man's eyes were slightly misty as he approached. "I wanted to thank you both for the kindness you've shown to all of us over the years. You've always treated the staff like family." William shook the man's hand firmly. "You've been family to us. That doesn't change just because our circumstances are changing. Will you keep in touch?" Catherine asked. "I'd love to hear how everyone is doing." Robert nodded, clearly moved by the request. "It would be an honor, ma'am." As evening approached, the family gathered for their final dinner at Kensington Palace. Catherine had requested the cook prepare a simple meal, fish and chips from the children's favorite local restaurant, eaten not in the formal dining room but in the cozy family kitchen, where they had shared so many casual meals over the years. "Tell us about the new house again," George requested as they ate. At 10 years old, he was the most aware of the significance of their move, but he was also excited about the prospect of greater freedom. "Well," William began, "it has a big kitchen with an island where you can do homework. And there's a conservatory with lots of windows where Mummy can have her morning tea. And stables? Charlotte asked hopefully. And stables, Catherine confirmed. Though we'll start with Sir Woofington before we think about horses. Louis clapped his hands in delight. Can he sleep in my bed? We'll see, Catherine said diplomatically, though she was already imagining the chaos of a large puppy in their new, more relaxed household. After dinner, they took one final walk through the palace gardens. The children ran ahead playing hide-and-seek among the topiary and flower beds that had been their playground for years. Catherine and William followed more slowly, taking in every detail of the place that had been their home. Do you have any regrets? William asked as they sat on a bench overlooking the pond where the children fed the ducks on weekend mornings. Catherine considered the question seriously. I regret that we couldn't find a way to serve the crown and protect our family at the same time. I regret that some people see our choice as abandonment rather than evolution. But I don't regret choosing our children's well-being over everything else. William nodded. I keep thinking about what kind of legacy we want to leave. Not just as royals, but as parents and partners. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? I want our children to remember that their parents loved each other enough to make difficult choices together. I want them to know that duty and authenticity don't have to be opposites. As the sun set over London, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Catherine felt a sense of completion rather than loss. Their royal chapter was ending, but their family story was continuing. They were trading public duty for private happiness, formal responsibility for personal authenticity. Tomorrow we start over, Catherine said softly. Tomorrow we start living, William corrected gently. That night, after the children were asleep in their palace bedrooms for the last time, Catherine and William sat together in their sitting room, surrounded by the boxes and bags that contained 13 years of royal memories. Tomorrow they would wake up as private citizens, free to write their own story without the weight of centuries of tradition and expectation. The quiet farewell that had begun weeks ago was almost complete. Soon they would just be William and Catherine again, a couple who had chosen love over duty, and discovered that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose your own happiness, even when the whole world is watching. 6 months later, Catherine stood in the garden of their new home watching William push Louis on the swing they had installed beneath the old oak tree. The sound of her family's laughter carried across the lawn, mixing with the excited barking of Sir Woofington, who was indeed a golden retriever, and had indeed claimed Louis's bed as his own. The transition had been easier than anyone had expected. The children had settled into their new school with remarkable resilience, making friends who knew them simply as George, Charlotte, and Louis, rather than as young royals. Their teachers had been discreet and professional, treating them with kindness but not deference. Catherine had found unexpected joy in the ordinary moments that had been impossible during their royal years. School pickup, grocery shopping, walks in the village without security details. These simple activities had become precious freedoms that she never took for granted. Mummy, look how high I can swing, Louis called out, his feet pointing toward the sky. Very impressive, Catherine called back, smiling at his excitement. Sir Woofington jumped up and down beneath the swing, trying to catch Louis's dangling feet. The phone in Catherine's pocket buzzed with a text message. These days her phone contained messages from other parents about playdates and school events, rather than briefings about state visits and official engagements. She glanced at the screen and saw a photo from one of Charlotte's new friends, showing the two girls working on a science project together. How's the book coming along? William asked as he approached, having left Louis to Charlotte's supervision on the swing set. Catherine had begun writing a book about early childhood development, drawing on her years of work with various charities and her experience as a mother. It was a project that allowed her to continue advocating for children while pursuing her own intellectual interests. Slowly but surely, she replied. It's strange writing in my own voice instead of speaking through official statements. William wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together watching their children play. He had started a consulting firm focused on environmental conservation, work that felt more meaningful to him than many of the ceremonial duties that had filled his royal calendar. Any second thoughts? He asked, echoing the question they had asked each other countless times over the past months. Only about not buying shares in tennis ball companies before we got Sir Woofington, Catherine replied, watching the dog chase yet another bright yellow ball across the lawn. Their finances had required careful planning, but they had been fortunate to have some inherited wealth and the ability to earn their own income for the first time in their adult lives. It was liberating to pay their own bills and make financial decisions based on their family's needs rather than public expectations. The doorbell rang, and Catherine went to answer it, finding their neighbor Mrs. Patterson holding a covered dish. The elderly woman had become an unofficial grandmother figure to the children, treating them with warmth but without any special deference to their background. "I made extra shepherd's pie," Mrs. Patterson announced. "Thought your family might enjoy it." "That's so kind of you," Catherine said, accepting the dish gratefully. This kind of neighborly kindness had been one of the unexpected gifts of their new life. "How's Charlotte getting on with her guitar lessons?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "She's loving them, though I'm not sure the rest of us are loving her practice sessions quite as much." Mrs. Patterson chuckled. "Music is a wonderful thing, even when it's not quite perfect yet." After their neighbor left, Catherine returned to the garden where William was now teaching George how to throw a proper cricket ball. Sir Woofington had apparently decided that every ball thrown was meant for him, adding chaos to the lesson. "We had a call from the palace today," William mentioned as George ran off to retrieve the ball from the dog. "They wanted to update us on the Constitutional Working Group's recommendations." Catherine felt a familiar flutter of concern. Even though they had stepped back from royal duties, the implications of their decision continued to ripple through the institution and the government. Good news or complicated news? Surprisingly positive news. They're recommending changes to the succession laws that would give future royals more flexibility in choosing their level of involvement in official duties. Catherine smiled. "So our choice might make things easier for our children when they're older?" "That's the hope." The working group concluded that forcing people into roles they're not suited for ultimately weakens the institution. As evening approached, the family gathered for dinner around the kitchen table they had chosen together. It was large enough for all of them, but intimate enough for easy conversation. The formal dining rooms and staff service of their royal years had been replaced by shared cooking responsibilities and lively debates about whose turn it was to feed Sir Woofington. "I got picked for the school football team," George announced proudly. "That's wonderful," Catherine exclaimed. "When is your first match?" "Saturday morning." "Coach says parents are welcome to come watch." Catherine and William exchanged a smile. The simple pleasure of attending their son's football match without security concerns or media attention was something they had dreamed about during their royal years. "We wouldn't miss it," William assured him. "Can Sir Woofington come too?" Louis asked hopefully. "I don't think dogs are allowed on the football pitch," Catherine said gently. "But he's very good at football," Louis protested. "He always steals the ball." After dinner, while the children did homework at the kitchen table, Catherine and William sat in their conservatory with cups of tea, watching the last light fade from their garden. The space had become Catherine's favorite room in the house, filled with plants and comfortable furniture that encouraged lingering conversations. "I had lunch with Sarah today," Catherine mentioned, referring to one of her former ladies-in-waiting who had become a close friend over the years. "How is she adjusting to retirement from royal service?" "Better than expected," she said. "Watching us make our choice gave her courage to make some changes in her own life. It was something they had heard from several people, that their decision had inspired others to examine their own lives and make choices based on authentic happiness rather than external expectations." William reached for Catherine's hand, a gesture that had remained constant throughout all their changes. "Do you think the children understand why we made this choice?" Catherine considered the question, watching through the window as Sir Woofington patrolled the garden for any remaining tennis balls. "I think they understand that we chose them. They feel secure and loved, and that's what matters most right now. And when they're older? When they're older, they'll understand that we showed them it's possible to choose your own path, even when it's difficult." As night fell over their quiet corner of the countryside, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought them to this peaceful moment. The dramatic announcement that had made headlines around the world now felt like ancient history. The media had largely moved on to other stories, and their family had found a rhythm that felt sustainable and authentic. Their quiet farewell to royal life had indeed left millions around the world with tears in their eyes, but not tears of sadness. Instead, people had wept for the beauty of a love story that had chosen personal happiness over public duty, for the courage it took to write your own ending, rather than accepting the one that had been written for you. In choosing each other and their children over the crown, William and Catherine had discovered that sometimes the most radical act of service is showing others that they, too, can choose love over obligation, authenticity over expectation, and personal happiness over public approval. Their story had begun as a fairy tale, but it had evolved into something more powerful, a testament to the enduring strength of love and the courage required to live according to your own values, even when the whole world is watching. As Catherine turned off the lights and prepared to join her family upstairs, she knew that this ending was really just the beginning of their most important chapter yet.